Hello, I'm Graham Horton and welcome to today's video. Now today's video is part 2 in a new series of tutorials I'm doing for absolute beginners to using the Panasonic Lumix FZ80 82 camera. Now remember, in part 1 we looked at the fully automatic mode, so that was the IA position, and I recommended that you use the IA Plus because that gave you options that are enabling you to take better pictures than the standard point and shoot mode. Of course, if you're buying this camera just to replace a smartphone and you want those longer telephoto shots, then of course just use the IA mode. You will get some good pictures, but you're not getting the best out of this camera. The IA Plus gives you particularly access to the exposure compensation dial on the back of the camera, which allows you to compensate for when the camera doesn't get the exposure quite right. Perhaps you're shooting on snow or on a beach, you're finding that you're underexposing the pictures. The exposure compensation gives you access to be able to compensate for that. Now in today's video we're going to go a step further and we're going to be looking at what's called the program auto mode, or it's P on the dial, on the mode dial. Now that opens up a lot more options for you to create better pictures. I'm going to take it steady because there's a lot to learn here, and it may take a couple of videos to be able to get all the points across. But what I'm trying to say is, using the program auto mode, you're still in a semi-automatic mode. You're letting the camera make a lot of the decisions for you, and in most cases it will get them right. And there are certain advantages to using this P mode. So let's have a look at it in a little bit more detail and I'll show you the way through the menus. Now, knowing most of you may want to use that x60 optical zoom of this camera to get those close telephoto shots, it's worth having a look at some of the hand holding techniques to enable you to get images which are shake free. Now if you are using the eye level viewfinder, the EVF, I do recommend you do get that Nikon DK20 eye cup. Use a bit of super glue and glue the 3 sides onto the housing. It gives you a lot more softer feel to your eye, shades off a lot more light so you're not having to shade it in sunshine, and it gives you a better point of contact on your eye to give you that stability. So if you're using the eye level viewfinder with or without glasses, then if I put this up to my eye, I've got a much steadier view. I can put my hand underneath to give me more grip. You may find that you're still getting shake in that situation, and what I've adopted when I'm using those long telephotos is the pistol grip stand. So with your arm on your shoulder, you can nestle the camera into your elbow there, put the camera up to your eye, and then take the shot. You're getting a lot more stability. You're not getting much side to side. If you are getting any up and down movement, it's very slight. So using that pistol grip shot will actually give you better stability. If you're still finding you're getting problems, then you can attach something like a mini tripod or one of these hand grips to the bottom of the camera. And again, if you're using the LCD screen, then it gives you a better point of contact. You can grip the camera better with this grip than using the side of the camera. So you can get it still, you can maneuver it around, and you've got a much better purchase. You can free your hand and then come back to take the shot. So if you are getting problems with stability, then any one of those methods might help you overcome them. Well, you might notice today I've come up with a better idea for filming the sequence from the back of the camera. Rather than hand holding the rig that's holding the 2 cameras, I've put it on a monopod, so now I can control it without getting my hand in the way, which is blocking some of the menu items in part 1. So apologies for that. Now we've got a much better idea and we can actually film the camera a little better. So what we're going to look at today is the program auto mode, and if you look at the back of the screen, you can see we're in the IA Plus mode. I'm going to turn the top mode dial until the P aligns with the mark on the flash housing. And as I do that, you'll notice that icon in the top left-hand side turns to a P. Now that puts us into the program auto mode. I'm just going to touch the center of the screen to bring the focus up to the middle. And now you've noticed that we have the facility of being able to point exactly where we want the focus point to be, or we can use the cursor keys to move backwards and forwards. You can change the size of that focus operation by using that back control dial, so you can set a very small area or you can set it to a large area depending on what sort of scene you're trying to capture. Let's just set this down to a small size and we'll set that somewhere in the center. So when you're in program auto mode, the camera is making some choices for you, and it will normally use the widest aperture, so that's letting in the maximum amount of light into the camera to reach the sensor. And that's a good thing. With this particular camera, you want as much light to hit that sensor as possible to give you better pictures. So the camera is making that choice for you. It's going to take the widest aperture depending on the zoom position. So if you notice at the moment we've got an aperture of f2.8, so that is the light that's been allowed to come into the camera, f2.8. so that's the widest aperture that the camera supports. But you notice as I zoom in, you notice that aperture changes, and now when we reach the full optical range, it's up to f5.9. so we've lost effectively 2 stops of light. Now I know this program is not supposed to be a technical description, but you must understand that the aperture will change as you change the zoom, and it's that aperture decrease which causes some of the problems in low light that you don't get good pictures. So it's important to understand that relationship between the amount of light hitting the sensor and the focal length or the zoom setting that you've got on the camera. So let's go back to that wide angle position, 20mm, and you can see the aperture is f2.8. The camera set a shutter speed there of 1/200th of a second, so it's going to give you images which are shake free at 1/200th of a second. Now if you look at the screen now, you can see that I've brought up a menu there that says auto, and that is the camera sensitivity. So it's adjusting the what's called the ISO, the camera sensitivity setting, automatically dependent on the amount of light that the camera is seeing. Now there's an advantage in that, as much as that it will compensate for changing light. So if you're going from dark to light, it will change the ISO, and then if necessary change the shutter speed as well to give you the right exposure. But there is a better mode, and if you just scroll along again, it says ISO, and the ISO will actually look at what you're shooting and try to determine if there's any movement. If there's any movement, it will try and set a sensible shutter speed to enable it to capture that image. Now there is a setting in the record setup menu, I want to show you that, which limits the ISO range that the camera will work to. This camera will perform very well up to ISO 800. Beyond ISO 800, you'll notice you're getting a lot more noise in the images, so it's better to restrict the camera so that you won't actually use beyond 800. And to do that, if you go into the record setup menu, so that's the camera icon as I got selected there now, and if I scroll down into page 5, and it's the last option there, you can see we've got ISO limit set. If I press menu set, you can see we can set it all the way from 200 all the way up to 3200, or turn the limit off and it will use whatever it feels like. I would say set that to 800 and it will limit the range at which that ISO will work. So what happens then is when the light level falls, the camera will start to increase ISO up to that ceiling that you set of 800. When you hit 800, it will start to change the shutter speed. It will make the shutter speed longer to allow that more light into the camera to give you the correct exposure. So that's the way the camera exposure system works. So with the ISO set to 800, you'll notice that it will not go above 800 when you take a picture. There it's actually taken it at ISO 80. So the camera always tries to use the lowest ISO it can, dependent on the light level and dependent on the aperture you've got set. And of course the aperture will depend on the zoom setting. One of the nice features about using the program auto mode is the fact that it does allow you to use what are called photo styles. And it's those photo styles which have got the facilities to change the way that the outer camera images come. Now with your camera, you're normally going to be taking images out of the camera which are called JPEGs. Those JPEGs are processed by the camera and are fixed. You can't change them afterwards. So it's important to get those JPEGs right out of camera. And the photo styles allow you to do that. It gives you facilities to change the sharpness of the image, the noise reduction that's applied to that image. More importantly, it allows you to change things like contrast and saturation. On a day like today, which is again very overcast, it allows me to move the contrast up a little bit to give a little bit more definition to the picture. And again, if you're in a low light situation, you might want to add a little more saturation to bring out the colors. So let me show you those. Again, if we go into the menu set, And I can use the scroll button, the zoom button, to switch back to the menus. On page 1, you can see we've got photo style. Now if I press menu set, it allows me to go into each of those photo styles, and you can see we've got standard, we've got vivid, we've got natural, we've got monochrome, we've got scenery, which is ideal for landscape as it enhances greens and blues. We've got portrait mode, which enhances skin tones and adds a slight softening effect. And then we've got custom, which you can save any one of those options into the custom menu. So if we go back into standard for a moment, you can see now if I scroll down, you can change the contrast, you can change the sharpness, you can change the noise reduction, and you can change the saturation. So if you want a little bit more contrast to your images, such as today, what I'm going to do first of all is take a picture with the standard setting. So let me just zoom in, and we've got a lady walking her dog across there, so let me just capture that as she goes by. So I'm going to capture that image, and now what I'm going to do is change the contrast. So I'm going to up the contrast to +3, and then we'll take the same picture, and you can see we've got a little bit more contrast to that image. Again, we can change things like the sharpness, and if you want a little bit more sharpness out of a camera without having to post-process, you can push the sharpness up to say +2. If you do that, it's worth taking a look at noise reduction. Now, noise reduction works by blurring some of those pixels to get rid of the noise introduced by the ISO setting. And if you want to turn it completely off, turn it to -5, and you'll get a lot more detail in the finer areas of the print. You will see a little bit more noise, but it's preferable to have a little bit more noise and a little bit more detail. So I normally set that to -5. Now if you want to add a little bit more color to the scene, just push your saturation up to +2 as well. So let me set that in, and let's take that same picture. Unfortunately the lady's gone by now, but we should have the same scene. So let me take that picture and we can have a look at that. The photo styles allow you to select those other profiles. So if you wanted more vivid control, you got vivid there. And again, you can alter the parameters within those predefined setups. You've got natural, which is a slightly softer look. You can change the default contrast if you like. Monochrome, which is black and white. And if you scroll down to the black and white, you notice we can change the way that the picture is captured. So it's effectively putting yellow filters over the lens to give you enhanced blues and oranges and reds to give you better sky. So you can play around with those to give you better monochrome images. And again, you've got scenery, which will take a picture in the scenery mode, which will be enhanced blues and greens. Fortunately, there's no blues today, but the greens should be a little bit better. One of the other things that the program mode opens up to you is the white balance. And the white balance is the way the camera tries to correct the colors in a scene. Your eyes are magnificent at being able to change the way that they respond if you're in bright sunlight and then you walk into a room which is just lit by table lights. Your eyes get the colors correct, but the camera needs to change that as well. So it uses the automatic white balance. It tries to find the brightest areas of the image and assumes that they're white, and it will then change the controls in the camera to give those white areas the right treatment. But again, the camera doesn't always get that right, and in the facilities on the camera at the bottom of the dial you can see their white balance. So that's at the quarter past position if you look at it on a clock face. So white balance is WB. If I click that, you can see that the camera is in the auto white balance mode. But if I'm shooting in sunlight and I don't want the camera to change the position, I can switch to sunlight. If it's overcast light today, I can use the cloudy position. And if I'm working in shade, I can go to the shade. If you're working in tungsten light, so if you're indoors and it's being filmed by table lights, then if you go into the tungsten mode, here the camera puts in a blue tint to overcome it. So that's why you're seeing the blue tint on screen. Then you've got the flash, which will automatically switch to when you enable flash. But if you wanted the flash white balance, if you're using external flash guns, then you can use the white balance preset there for flash. We've got an area here called Custom 1, Custom 2, Custom 3 and Custom 4, and they allow you to put a target of a white card in front of the camera. So if I've got a white piece of paper here, so if I put a white piece of paper in front of the camera, if I try and hold everything in position, so let me try and grip the camera, you can now see that it's saying white select, so we're in position number 1. Use the up arrow cursor and it brings in the target. Now when I press the shutter button, you can see that it's completed and it's set the white balance to the color temperature on that white piece of paper. So if now we take a picture, you can see we've got a nice natural looking color from the auto white balance. And again, you can change that by going white balance. You can set up to 4 presets, or if you know the actual color temperature, you can use the Kelvin control, and again you've got a slider on the right hand side. You can actually change it to your lights. If you've got LED lights that you know are 5600 Kelvin, you can dial that in on the right hand side to give you the correct color balance for your lights. Put it back into auto white balance. Now if you find you're getting slight color casts with your particular camera, if you go into auto white balance and then use the down arrow key, it allows you to fine tune that. So if you're finding you're getting blue images, you can make them warmer by going to the left hand side. But again, this is supposed to be an absolute beginner's tutorial, but for those that are following along and want to know a little bit more, you've got that facility of changing the control point for that auto white balance and indeed all the other parameters. Now the program auto mode contains a facility called program shift, but as this is a absolute beginner's program, I'm not going to go into that in this particular setup. If you want to learn about program shift, in the other tutorials I've done for the FZ80, in the P mode you'll see all the facilities that program shift gives you, but I want to stay with that maximum aperture as that will give you the best images from this camera. What I also want to look at is on the back of the camera. If I just zoom back a little bit so we can see the 4-way cursor dial, make sure we've got focus. You notice on the dial we've got the direct area, we've got white balance, we've got the timer, and we've got ISO. If you wanted to get the best possible images you can, if you set the ISO to ISO 80, and that's the lowest value this camera supports, you're going to get the images with the least amount of noise. It depends on the amount of light level you've got, but in all circumstances, if you can shoot at ISO 80, that would be my preferred option. Let's leave that set to ISO 80 for the moment. Now you notice at the bottom of the screen there's a little square with plus or minus, and that's exposure compensation. And to get exposure compensation, it's exactly the same as you did with the IA Plus mode. Use the back control dial. So that's the dial here at the top. Push it in, it brings up the exposure value scale. So if your images are coming out underexposed, you can make them brighter by using the plus values. And if they're coming out too light, then you can make them darker by using the minus controls. The middle is no control. What the camera also supports is the fact that you can now change the way that the camera meters the subject. So if I press the menu set button and we scroll through to page 2, you can there see metering mode. Now in the IA and IA Plus mode, it's always the whole of the screen that it's looking for to establish the metering. But with this mode, the P mode and all the other semi-automatic modes, you can actually set whether you want to use the whole screen for brightness selection, or whether it's just going to be the center, or whether it's going to be a very precise area, so that's spot metering. If you're using center weighted, that's ideal. If you're shooting portraits against the light, it will then just take the central area and not respond by trying to make the image a little too dark by adjusting for the background. So center weighted is ideal if you're using portraits. Whole area tries to look at the whole brightness between the center and the outside edges, so again it will try and make the best image possible. If you're having trouble getting exact exposure, you can use the spot, but that's quite difficult to use. So we'll stay with the center weighted for the moment. Now another thing you can get with this mode is the fact that you can actually set the precise point that you want the camera to focus. In the IA mode, if I just go back to IA mode for a moment, when I press the shutter halfway down, you can see we get a number of blocks, and those are the blocks that the camera thinks are the precise areas that it wants to focus on, but they may not be the area that you want to focus on. You can use the touchscreen on the camera to go to the area you want, but that then gives you a tracking mode, which is not ideal. But in the P mode, if I just go back to the P mode, you can see that if we use the left-hand navigation dial, so if I just click that to the left-hand side, it brings up the automatic focus mode, and you can set between the 49 area, which is what it uses for the fully automatic mode. You can use tracking, or you can use face and eye detection. Custom multi-mode I'll go into when we look at aperture priority. What I want to do is look at the one area, so it's only going to be looking at one point, and that area you can set by using the down arrow key. So again, now using that back control dial, you can change the size. You can actually then change the position. So if you're trying to focus on a bird in the branch there, you can put it onto the bird like so, change the size of it, and then you can take the picture and you'll get a precise focus point there, not the camera trying to select what it thinks is going to be your focus point. And it's quite precise. I want to make today's video overly long, but we've only just scratched the surface of what this camera is capable of, and in the next part 2, we'll be looking at the shutter priority and aperture priority modes, and I'll expand more on some of the features of the menus here that you can use to get better photographs. But the aperture and shutter priority are there to allow you to take a little bit more control on how the camera responds to particular scene types. If you're going to be shooting sports, or you're going to shoot macro or things like that, so you've got control over the aperture and you've got control over the shutter, and you will determine the priority that you need them in. So in the next program we'll look at aperture priority and shutter priority. A little bit more limited with this particular camera because it's not got a constant aperture lens like, say, the FZ200 or the FZ300, but nevertheless you can use those shutter priority mode, especially if you're shooting sports or things like birds in flight where you want a higher shutter speed. So I'll leave it at that point in this particular video. I hope you're finding it useful. Your comments are really appreciated. If I'm not giving you the right information or too deep, please let me know in the comments below. It will help me formulate the next videos in this series. And of course, if you've not seen my photographic blog, on the download section of that blog there's an application there to join my newsletter group, and that's going out to just under 4,000 people now every month. It's more than a newsletter, it's more or less a technical publication, some things that I don't publish on the blog as a way of saying thank you for your subscription to the newsletter. So check that out if you've not already done so. And also, if you're a new viewer and you're not already subscribed to this channel, please do hit that subscribe button and the bell notification icon. It will really help for future videos. So until then, thanks very much for watching. Please do take care, and I hope to see you all very soon. Goodbye for now.